That's not even showing. Well, there we go. No,
Oh, we're
okay.
live. Minus the intro.
Oh, there we go. Let me hold on a second. I know what it is. 1 second. And now we're live. Well, sometimes you got to press the right button. All right. So there we go, folks. Welcome everybody watching live stream, or if you're watching this recorded, I'll bring in our friend Neil here and get you in there. There you are, Neil. Welcome. All right. We just did the intro, so you didn't miss anything. So welcome everybody to this edition. This is Master Chat number 21. And today we've got the privilege of having Len DiCostanzo. And everybody who knows Len knows that he's was an MSP, went into the PSA business. He understands, MSPs at a DNA level. And so our job is to pick his brains, his beautiful brains today, and find out exactly, how we can help the whole channel partner community to scale their business. So first of all, welcome, Len. How are you?
I'm great, Julian. Thanks for having me. This is exciting. Working with Randall and Neil as well.
All right, Randall. Hello. Neil. Hello.
I was hoping that Neil was sponsored by George Foreman, but I guess not.
No, I should apologise. My son has bought his first property in the UK, so my garage and office is now full of boxes, including, as you spotted, Randall, George Foreman. But he's not sponsoring me. But if he's listening, I'm up for office.
Yeah.
Well, hey, if he's buying a house, it's pretty good, man, because it's pretty expensive houses these days. But jumping back to the topic here. So today's topic is accelerating growth of managed services. I mean, everybody in the game of managed services understand, managed services to a degree. And the challenge is, how do you make it more profitable? How do you scale it? And it all depends on the maturity level, right? So Len, I'm going to have you kick it off, right? What's your take if you were talking to a whole bunch of MSPs as an opening statement of how they should think about accelerating their growth?
Yeah, well, great opening, because I often open a session by asking the audience, what do they call themselves, right? Probably one of the first self-identification people out there. Like, how do you identify? Like, are you an MSP, a VAR, a solution provider? So I often say, what does MSP mean to you? To me, it means a managed service practice. So when I talk to MSPs, I really try to share, you have to be good at something. What technology solution do you deliver to your clients that drive the outcomes they're looking for? And then when that solution is deployed, have you defined your recurring services, your managed services, to bolt onto that solution? And I kind of open up with that, and you'll often find, like most MSPs, like I remember when that term first came out. In fact, Julian, you and I were chatting the other day, the first term before MSP was an OIP, an outsourced infrastructure provider. Some of the early MSPs, that's what they were called. And then it became MSP, and more of a marketing term. So I always just make sure, attendees or people listening to my session know, I believe MSP is a managed service practice. Be good at something, figure out what you bolt on, and then get good at something else. Get good at something else, and continue to grow your managed service practice with all of these recurring services that you can define around that solution.
So Len, I know you've just come from a couple of events where you actually had this topic as a thing that you doubled down on, right? Yeah. What was your sense from talking to the MSPs in person? What's the sense you got from them in terms of, where they're at, what they're thinking, what their challenges are? What's your sense?
I think everybody's challenged on the cybersecurity side for sure. I think before they can even get there, the biggest challenge is a lot of them are not really executing on a repeatable process. I actually asked a question of, there's about 75 in the room, up to maybe 100 in the room, and none of them, I would say about 80% of them, not none of them, 80% of them raised their hands when I said, how many do not have a formal service catalog? So what that tends to what that leads to is custom proposals all the time, taking a lot of time to figure out what you do to solve this client or this prospect's needs. So definitely there were folks who felt they were doing something custom all the time. So one of my sessions was building out your service portfolio. And it wasn't just your managed service portfolio, but what are you good at? What's your core competency or practice or, whatever you want to call it? And what are the services the recurring services you've defined to go against that solution? And actually, after the session, I got really positive feedback that it was kind of inspiring and inspirational to kind of hear some of the things. And once we talked about defining your service catalog and having a formal service catalog management process, we then talked about how do you price and bundle your services, because most folks look at managed services as a bundle, and what they lose sight of is that a project is actually a bundle as well, and that project is a bundle of all the services in your catalog that you may deliver one time, like set up a workstation, set up a user on a SaaS app, set up anything, configure something. And those services put together means you're going to go drop this solution into a client. And back in the day, because I've been around a long time, maybe some of you folks also, but back in the day when you dropped your solution in, you were kind of done, and you just waited to get those angry phone calls that something was broken or what you did broke something when your guy was there or gal was there last. And I think what's happening now obviously is folks are getting really good at infrastructure solutions. We've started adding tools, automation, and tightening up our process around this managed service offering. And now we're just seeing a lot of folks having success with managed services. So, the other thing I guess I'll throw out before I kind of lose track here, there's a lot of best practices out there that partners can use as well as they're kind of going through a process of, building out their managed service practice. And you need to look at, certainly Neil out of the UK, ITIL best practice framework, and, RACI and a couple of others, but, it's been done before, and we're here chatting about it. And I could certainly remember when managed service first came out, there were still people that were early adopters like myself. I mean, I built my managed service practice in the late 90s and started talking about it with my peers as early as 1998. So, I just didn't call it that. I called it a recurring service delivery model to my clients, and to my peers, I called it a recurring profit engine, right? Because that's what it was. Deliver recurring services, add some automation into it, reduce your cost, improve your process, and you probably could charge the same amount of money. But as you add in these cool tools that are now out there, you're going to drop your cost, increase your profit.
You were definitely in the early days. And, Len, one thing about Len, I wanted people obviously to know as well is that when the PSA, solutions were coming on market, there was Len, right, out there saying that you got to put a PSA into your managed service business because you got to manage all these crazy services. So we could dig into that as well as one. Randall, you want to jump with the first question?
Yeah, well, first of all, I like Len's use of language. I think it's very important when we use language in the right way. Going from a provider, which to me, a provider is something you give something to your client, and then they do what they want with it. That's a provider. But a practice goes much beyond, and it just makes you think of what a lot of people are missing is that sync from just providing a service to really making it a practice. And really going down into the nuts and bolts of how you're delivering and making this a whole process, making some IP in how you deliver your services. I think it's very important because I think a lot of people get lost between being a provider and being a practice. I think it's brilliant.
So there we go. So you got to be a practice. Neil?
Yeah, well, Randall got one of my 2 points. I love that language. I love the word practice because it definitely, I think it makes you think about your customers in a different way. Makes you think more professionally. So I like that. The other thing I picked up on was it's been done before. So he mentioned specific frameworks which have been used. So it is an interesting situation where when you get a very creative team of people together, which you get in a lot of MSPs, they try to reinvent the wheel. And it's
Hey,
like,
Neil, hold on a second, Neil. You know, your sound is really not really great, but are you using Chrome or Safari?
no,
Should you
no,
go?
I suspect, hang on, let's see if I can find the setting. I suspect.
I'll let you jump out and jump back in. All right, while we continue the conversation because we don't want to annoy people out there, right, Len?
Yeah, I was trying to listen into every other word.
Yeah. Let's jump in and jump out. So,
Well, I think, and let me clarify, right? I think
sure.
we're in a situation now, kind of like, probably 21 or 22 years after, this person first heard the term MSP, that people have done it now, right? But back then, when I was kind of just doing it, not really, not many people had actually done it. So, you can be a pioneer, and I'm not saying people are not going to come up with something new, something better, because that's what this is. I used to get concerned when I would hear people talk about, transforming your business as opposed to evolving. So that's another play on words, Randall, right? It's like to transform is almost like, you think of the Incredible Hulk, and that's a pretty painful process. If you think evolution, it just means that, based on what's going on, your surroundings, you're kind of, molding into a new shape and kind of doing it as you go. So there are going to be people who are going to do some things for the first time. In fact, a couple of years back so you kept mentioning PSA, Julian. So I'll just, remind folks out there who may know me or not, but I was with Autotask for about 11 years. We kind of built the PSA space with our, primary competitor ConnectWise, a couple of great solutions out there. And, it was always about, how do you take what people know and just improve the process, put the right tools in place and keep going. But what are the new things? And after leaving Autotask, and then I joined Datto after the merger, and then we lost the merger. So I was, kind of out looking for a new role. And I joined a company, Accordo, and we built Cloud Optimizer, which basically was one of the first SaaS management platforms out there. And to us, that we were kind of first in the game. We sold the business, which was great. But now there's a lot of SMPs or SaaS management platforms out there as defined by Gartner. So always some new stuff rolling in. Be ready for it. Evolve your business to include it and be one of the first guys talking about it, because who knows, you might be me in 20 years talking about the past, right? So
there you go. So let's double click on the automation aspect, and we'll walk through a few of these things. But how does automation play? Obviously, it's important, right? But could you really even do a managed service business if you don't automate it? And what does automation look like when you're accelerating your managed service business? Because at the end of the day, it's about increasing the actual, reducing your cost, speeding things up, improving productivity to actually make more money, right? So what's your take on automation and why MSP should be doubling down on that?
I guess, thing I always say is you really can't be an MSP without an RMM, right? So again, I'll use the MSP term because that's what everyone uses. But, the feeling I had was I was delivering managed services before there was such a thing as an RMM, a remote monitoring and management solution. But it was kind of proactive, hands-on, let me prevent problems from happening with, a tech or a resource doing work. But RMMs showed up and essentially would automate whatever a tech was doing with their hands. And as a result, as I was building my managed service practice and these tools were coming around, you can reduce the labor and automate. I'll just simple thing like check disk or, checking how, if the hard drive is full, and then automating and developing scripts to kind of resolve other technical work you would normally do with your hands. So it's just about having the right tools. RMM was first. I believe, PSA and RMM, what's chicken or the egg, what came first. But if I were to kind of put my hat on, for me, I was a developer as I built my business from 1984. I started very young and I was writing code. So I wrote a ticketing system. I wrote a CRM. I wrote my own quote coding tool and built my service catalog. And then I remember having some folks use my stuff in the late 90s because they were like, what the heck is that? But then I sold my business, and I never became, what my pal Arnie Bellini became, and that's ConnectWise, because people were starting to use his thing that he wrote for his business. And once you start having, I think PSA was in the background, but RMM kind of got stuck in your face early on as, you have to be, have an RMM to be an MSP. And then PSA kind of joined the race. And then what really happened, I remember joining Autotask and talking to our CEO at the time, why don't we have an RMM? And the thinking back then, pre-consolidation and everybody buying everybody up was, let the RMMs be the RMMs. We built they built integrations into our PSA platform. But the reality is PSA and RMM, very symbiotic, I like to say. They work well together. And when we acquired an RMM company and kind of coined our first, the first person or the first company to use unified platform, we unified RMM and PSA, and that really made the world a difference because, those two solutions tightly coupled really make an easy life. And then when you got a PSA, every solution out there has to integrate because that's the MSP's single pane of glass. Essentially, every other tool monitoring, BCDR or security, you don't want an MSP going to look at all these different, screens and portals, open a ticket in that PSA. So really PSA just became the linchpin, as I like to call it, for an MSP, and RMM tightly coupled with it. So just got to add automation. It's not just automation, it's process at the same time, right? Because you can't just throw automation in. You got to put a process in place where the people and the technology work really well together.
I think also we talk a lot about, building our stack, but I think of building a physical stack. If you put blocks on top of each other, it's going to eventually wobble and tumble over. And what you're talking about is really working on the foundation. When you have a foundation, the stack can go much higher than if you're just putting this together piecemeal. So I think there's a lot of strategy that MSPs are missing. They're looking to build their stack, but they haven't put in the hard work to give it a good foundation. Finding the right tools is so important. The right PSA for you, the right RMM for you. And then that becomes your foundation to go upwards, because it's very easy for a tower to crumble down. It's not on something solid.
That's for sure. You know what? That's a really great summary, right? To get us to where we are today. So now we know there's a thing called PSAs. Obviously, most people know about that, and RMMs. And you got to put your foundation together, as Randall said. But then you see the history of that has been 20 years, right? And now here we are. It's sort of like everybody should get it by now.
What's next?
Yeah.
What's next?
Yeah. It is just
actually, you see what's going on now, though, right? Is even though Autotask, we acquired an RMM and kind of integrated them very tightly, and other companies have kind of done the same. The bottom line is there's still different products that are integrated. So what's happening now is you got the new age of PSA RMM that's showing up, where not only are they tightly coupled, they're actually the same app, right? The same platform. So I think the legacy platforms got to stay on their toes, because there's a lot of new kids on the block that are making it a little bit more seamless in terms of that foundation Randall talked about.
Some disruption. Well, Neil, you're back. Let's hear if your sound is any better. You can have your first question.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Is that better?
Much of that. Perfect.
You still have an accent, though. We can't get rid of that.
Picking up from where you couldn't hear me before, I liked what Len was saying in terms of it builds upon what you guys were just discussing in this room as well. Is this stuff's been done before? So the key thing I think sometimes is that when you're in the channel, if you're not careful, the stack becomes stale. You become really good at what you're good at, but you don't do what Len suggested, which is do the bolt-on, add the next thing. And especially when you see a new piece of technology, that's when we need to make those move forwards. Where hanging on, I've seen so many what would back in the days been VARs and LARs who sat on their back on their own hands for years before jumping into MSPs and suddenly realizing almost too late they should have done it a decade ago. So I think there's that kind of constant dilemma that people have in MSPs. And the other thing I'd add on as well is I love all this talk of new products and services. Because as you guys know, my background in sales, and there's nothing a salesperson likes more than some shiny new tech he can talk about. Because every time you put something new out into the market, what you're really doing is giving a fresh injection of energy to hopefully your marketing and your sales guys to go out there and have loads more interesting conversations. Because until we do get all replaced by robots, people are still buying people. And to make that happen, we need to build rapport. And to build rapport, we need conversations.
Good point.
I'll jump on that too, because it's one thing to see that shiny object, right? But we know, I certainly feel I know what it takes to add a new solution into your portfolio. And what I certainly hear MSPs now talking about tool bloat, right? So, you don't want to really see that shiny object without really understanding how you're going to bring it into your portfolio. And a true service portfolio management process is what you need. Like, what's in your pipeline of new services? How are you evaluating it? How does it fit into your project or core competency? What project revenue can I generate from it? And when I'm done dropping in my solution that maybe that tech helped me with, now what's my recurrent revenue opportunity? And you really got to go through a process of breaking down that shiny object and bring in. I've spoken to 80, 100 employee MSPs who can only add one new shiny tool a month, right? And I think sometimes what happens is, you go to a trade show, you see a shiny tool. Okay, I got it. Let me sign that contract right here. Great sales rep, or owner at the booth, and you're in. And then you're like, now what do I do? So it's great to look at them shiny objects, but certainly I always talk about having a service portfolio management approach so that you can bring in new stuff and retire your old stuff. And that's key to the shiny objects.
Makes a ton of sense.
I think we should talk numbers, because that kind of leads into what we're talking about just before going on air, about how a lot of people don't know their own numbers, and they might not even know that they're on a downhill slope, because they have their pricing, it's probably wrong, and they have all their expenses, and they're finding themselves in trouble.
So go ahead.
Funny you say that, Randall, because I'm working with a client now, and I just sent out a survey on print management. Right, I was pretty surprised how many MSPs responded that they don't see an opportunity in a print management service, and then the ones that did, in response to the survey, they said that they eat the cost of their print management tool because it simplifies their print management, right? But why wouldn't you? What do you mean by eat it? Are you evaluating how it increased the cost of your bundle? Did it reduce your labor so much that you actually made more money but kept your price the same? Like, I guess I always like to delve in a little deeper as to what you mean by that, because I am definitely not an advocate of eating a tool because it makes you better. In fact, that's a reason to charge a little bit more, because you're going to be more efficient, a little bit better. So, interesting point, right? I always kind of say, understand your costs, and you can sell it for whatever you want. But I do think a lot of MSPs are out there, certainly the lower, 25%, they struggle with it. And I just saw some stats, lower 25% of MSPs are not profitable. They're not pricing right. They don't understand their cost. They don't know how to add and build profit into their pricing strategy. So you're right, slippery slope that you can go down pretty quick.
I think the challenge is, and I challenge anybody who's listening, increases your prices by 10%, see what happens. You will notice that of all the people I've talked to about this and have done this challenge, hardly anybody has gone back, because it just works. And if you do have one or two clients that balk at the price, well, lock them in with a contract, make them sign for a year or two, lock in at the old rate. But you'll notice that people, they understand. They see the price of gas going up, the price of food, restaurants. Why wouldn't it be the same with us? We have to pay our employees more. We want to get good employees, not lousy ones. So value what you do.
It's one of the classic thing there, Randall, because again, it's about knowing your numbers. Because if you know your numbers, and you know that you put your price up by 10%, then you've got to lose 25% of your customer base to be worse off. Mm-hmm. So when you say to somebody, if you put your price up by 10%, will you lose 25% of your customer base? The answer will always be 0. So it's a safe choice to make and sound logic behind it. So, but that then for me reflects back on board composition. Who is it within an organization who's making those decisions? If it's tech-led, it may be sexy technology, but he doesn't know the number. Who's the finance director? Or is the company run by a chartered accountant and a CPA? Because those guys are going to be driven purely by spreadsheet. So I think actually thinking about, we talked on previous mass chats about the culture within the organization, but that culture around the board table, do they have a clear vision? Is that a vision something they're actually going to use, or is it just a bit of empty nonsense stamped into the staff handbook? These are we're opening some big questions.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about numbers a second. So let's put them in three buckets, right? You got a bottom 25%, right? That's probably losing money. You got the middle 50%, let's say, that's sort of like breaking even, up and down, that type of thing. Then you got a top 25% just rocking it out. Those ones we don't really need to worry about. They've got their their sweet spot. They're building and growing like crazy. So we're really trying to help the middle 50% to get up to speed, and hopefully the bottom 25% can scale up, right? If we look at that as a general way to paint the whole MSP community. So depending on where you are, which bucket you're in, will be different things you need to do, right? Let's wrap up on the tools 1 second. You mentioned, Len, that there's new tools coming out, right? That's so better integrated. It does enough of what an MSP wants. And being in the PSA business, that many MSPs don't even use the full functionality that they're being sold, right? So today, I think it's a bit of a balance between the new solutions coming up that's delivering enough of the services or solutions that a PSA would deliver with the right balance of RMMs and stuff. Are you seeing these new tools that's popping up right now? Do you see that really giving the current PSAs a challenge in the marketplace? Is that a better choice for MSPs to look at that?
I don't know if it was Randall O'Neill who said it, or maybe it was you, Julian, but, an MSP, because we're using that term here, not a solution provider, not a VAR, but an MSP has got to understand what they're looking for and what their team is looking for and how they want to operate. So, they kind of have similar functions. They're typically going to have a CRM in there, coupled with a project management tool, coupled with a service desk, some other odds and ends in there, contract management, billing, provisioning. So if you're having trouble in certain areas, you just got to evaluate the tool that's going to fix the issue you have. Kind of like when you solve a client need or want, what's the pain point? Because there's probably a couple of different ways to skin that cat. So it's really just understanding where your pain is and how you want to resolve it, right? But I do think these newer platforms can certainly give the established platforms a run for their money, just because maybe they're easy use, the UI that I've seen, but nothing like tried and true. It works. So I think there's a lot of tools out there. I do think PSA, the functions of a PSA are still the most important. Like, do you want a separate CRM that when you have an opportunity, you got to go to a separate quoting tool that you're going to quote. And when you win that opportunity, you want to re-enter everything into a project tool. And then you want to track time and send an invoice. But then when you do managed services and your ticketing, you want to do that in a separate system. I think the first problem you have to tackle as an MSP is, what's my unified solution, right? I've always wanted to do, and I talked about it with Autotask back in the day, is I want to be able to track my opportunity, my leads, then do a quote, hit a button, turn the quote into the project. When the project's done, whatever my managed service work, turn that into my contract, and just kind of like everything's just getting handed off to the next phase or the next stage of what I call, the client success journey, right? You want to achieve the outcomes you said you were going to achieve, and then continually stay in that client. I like to call it, the 4 critical stages to secure your client for life. Get a great CRM, opportunity management, do a great project, bolt on your recurring revenue, deliver your service desk services and all the related managed services, and then become that IT department for SMB, supplement internal IT, whatever it is. But learn that client and propose next year's technology solution, and keep on doing it, and you might have to grab a few new tools along the way as you're doing that.
I think the problem with pain is that we get desensitized to our own pain. And I think it's important to really take some time and step back. Sometimes it involves bringing in somebody from the outside who can look into your company to identify the pain points, because maybe you don't have any pain points as a business owner, but maybe one of your managers, one of your techs has a pain point, and that could be a great way to start relieving that pain is by having those conversations. And that's what we love to do anyway.
Yeah.
For sure. So we talked about solutions. We talked about new platforms coming up. The main thing is there as a takeaway is that you better figure out, what platforms you're going to be using, and that's got to mesh to your skills and your processes and so on. Because without something like this, you're just not gonna make it. So let's talk about the acceleration component now. We're about halfway through, so now I'm an MSP. I've got a platform. It's working well. Maybe I've added a couple of tools. I'm tweaking it, looking great, right? Now I want to accelerate. And what I heard you said, Len, is that you got to really understand your portfolio. You got to know what you can do, and then how do you build from your portfolio, your catalog of business. So what advice would you give someone to, first of all, how do you look at your catalog, your portfolio? Or do you automatically just go to, let's add cybersecurity? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the market opportunity tends to present itself, right? We all know what's happening with cybersecurity. You got bad actors all over the place. And as the cloud has just taken hold, SaaS has taken hold, remote work taking hold, you're just seeing the attacks just intensify, vectors, just multiple ways bad actors are getting in, right? So you do see an opportunity in cybersecurity, and you make. In fact, that session you mentioned, I did it with my buddy Peter Kajawa over at ConnectWise Service Leadership. The top quartile of partners, the most profitable partners, continue to become and get more profitable because they have made the commitment that cybersecurity isn't a decision the client makes. It's the decision they make and go, hey, change in landscape, boom. This is now part of what I'm delivering to you to protect you the way I know you need to be protected. So I think market opportunities present themselves if you jump on them the right way, if you assimilate new tech into your business, into your portfolio, and you properly wrap services around it. Like, one of the things you got to watch as an MSP these days is don't start to become a reseller. I think a lot of MSPs now think if I'm dropping in a SaaS license, I'm still an MSP. But if they're not wrapping their services around those SaaS licenses, they're now just a reseller, and they're not really developing their own IP, their own process of delivering an extra valuable service, right? So, the market opportunity will present itself, but talk to your clients. Like, what are they saying to you? You don't want to add a new service that you're not going to be able to sell to your client base. And I think that's really key. Something like cybersecurity is going to be easy to kind of, I don't want to say easy. Sometimes you can go in with cybersecurity and not have to sell, right? Especially if a third-party auditor, like an insurance guy went in or a gal went in and said, I can't insure you until you do this, this, and this. You need a SIM and you need a that. Boom. Sign a PO. You're not selling. But what do your clients need? Are your clients talking about a phone system that's, they want to move to a better system? Are they using a CRM that doesn't talk to the phone system and you want to couple that? Maybe you got to look at a new UCaaS type of solution or CCaaS type of solution, contact center. So I think, looking at what you're doing right now, looking at whatever market opportunities are out there to make it easy for you to kind of newsjack and ride along with certain things going on out there like cybersecurity, or what are your clients saying, right? What do they need you to do? And you'll probably have a swath of your clients with very similar needs, especially if you take a look at the verticals that you're in, right? Those verticals have very defined needs. And, outside of cybersecurity, certainly for me, I always like to make a joke about it, right, Julian, is, how about it? An Italian from New York who focused on the construction vertical when I was an MSP, right? And, bottom line is, if I went into a construction opportunity with an MSP who didn't know construction, I would win. So you got to understand, the market opportunity present itself. What are your clients asking? And then what are those verticals you're in? And what is the construction client you're using now? That's how I did it. What are they using now? Oh, I can get into construction accounting. Let me become a reseller of that SaaS and wrap my training, implementation, support services around it. They are taking e-size drawings and using a ruler and a pencil to measure and do quotes, and it takes them 2 weeks to do a $7 million bid. Oh, there's an on-screen takeoff solution. So, it's not just tech infrastructure. It's not just cybersecurity. It's, what do your clients need? What are they doing that's good that you could take to other clients or prospects in that space? So,
You mentioned something pretty interesting, Len, about this false sense that an MSP may think that they're an MSP because they're selling SaaS solutions. But if you're selling a SaaS license for $20, right, and you're doing no value add to it, then you are a reseller, right? You're reselling, SaaS, right? So no SaaS should probably go out of the door until you wrap some service around it to make it your own. And I think what I'm hearing here, correct me if I'm wrong, but you really need to spend your energy, your effort into understanding what's in your portfolio, what's in your customers, world, and start to connect those dots. All right. And the better you can connect those dots, that becomes your roadmap for baking out, if you will, your portfolio. And that's probably where they probably need to spend most of their time, maybe.
And then make them an offer they can't refuse.
That's it. Well, that's certainly one of the first, steps in my workshops, when I talk about service portfolio management. It's like, what are you doing right now? What's in your proposals right now? Even though you might not have a formal service catalog or service portfolio management process, just look at what you're doing now. Let's start to formalize it. If you've been using a PSA or a ticketing system, you should know how long it's been taking you to do some of these things you've done before. So start to formalize it, right, in a service catalog approach. And as you add new products or whatever, take a look at a vendor. Like, I'm doing a lot of partner program development for vendors now. I'm kind of working with vendors to be more aligned with how MSPs go to market. So when I work with a vendor, I'm like, okay, you got a great, SaaS offering. How does the MSP make money outside of the 25% you're telling them they're going to get, or the 20% you're going to get? What's the project they got to deploy? How long does it take to deploy it? What kind of training is needed? What are they going to do once the solution is deployed? Does it impact their service desk? Does it increase the amount of tickets? Because you're saying it's great, it's going to simplify, but they're going to get a call about that. They're going to have to monitor that, and manage that, right? Administer it. So, there's just work to build out your portfolio. So it's not trivial. And you mentioned 20 points, and it kind of clicked something in my head. But pre-pandemic, very few partners, and I know this because we built Cloud Optimizer for Office 365 at a quarter around 2018, 19. They said, oh, we don't make enough money on Office. But you had some partners that had learned how to monetize beyond the license with Office. And I think the pandemic, and I actually work with another client who actually had a Dynamics 365 practice, a Microsoft 365 practice, and they wanted to bring partners who didn't know how to monetize beyond the license into their fold so they could build a collaboration solution around Office 365, because the MSP didn't have the wherewithal to do that. But I do think now a lot of MSPs or Microsoft partners realize you can monetize beyond that Office license and drive collaboration, license management, drive adoption, and really make a ton of money project-wise, and then orchestrate and monetizing your recurring revenue around that.
Sure. Yeah, the downstream revenue is astronomical, and just a very quick side note that even Microsoft is actually changing up their own partner programs to better align with that type of a mentality. Like, don't just resell my licenses, All right, you got to bake stuff and around it. Neil, what are you thinking so far? Putting on your sales cap, how
Well,
would an MSP rock this out?
Well, I think it's. I think what this really shows clearly is the need to be, make sure every department of your business is connected. You have to understand your product stack. You need to not bloat your pipeline by products which is, like I said, too much shiny syndrome. You need to give the ammunition to sales and marketing to talk out. So I think that's the real challenge for a lot of businesses. Is sometimes you get so busy doing business, and I think particularly that bottom 25%, they're so busy transacting and losing money that they don't think they have the time to take that day to stick the management team in a meeting, to stick the marketers in a room for another day, to phone the sales guys off the phone for a day to discuss, and then bring everyone together to map it. So this is one of those classic dilemmas businesses face, which is recognizing that if investing your time in developing your business is not a cost where you're losing money, you're building future revenue. So that's what I'm kind of like picking up from. So like making sure that everyone is, it's like, I've seen crazy things done by MSPs where I had an MSP that I was involved with once, and it was run by an accountant, and he just looked at how much he could earn per sales guy. And he went, right, this is my new revenue target, hire me 15 new sales guys. But it's like, but we don't have the pipeline for 15 new sales guys just yet. So unsurprisingly, that wasn't a very good exercise for them. So yeah, investing that time in understanding your clients and then mapping that journey through your business is absolutely, so I'm going to have to just like 100% agree with Len on that one, which is drive that through. And the only way you do it is by every member in that organization working as a team, because that old classic, I love my business cliches, but a team's only as good as its weakest link. So make your weakest link your strongest link.
Get everybody in the game. So we talked a bit about the portfolio and how do you get it there. Let's get a little bit more specific if we can. The last 20 minutes or so. So there are things. There is cybersecurity is the big thing, right? There is the digital transformation of business is everything. Then you've got work from home. You've got VoIP and UCaaS and so on. So there is no shortage of solutions you can wrap services around. But let's talk about the hard one, the big one, the one where you said that, Len, that the top 25% of the rock stars in the MSP community have figured out a way to bake in cybersecurity, which I agree. I mean, I don't think you can actually have any kind of managed service without cybersecurity. Whether you're doing it in-house or you're outsourcing it, you've got to figure this out, right? And I think it's pretty clear now, after the umpteen interviews we've done, that finding professional cybersecurity experts to deliver these services are very, very difficult. And so you do have to decide what you can do in-house and what you can outsource. What is your take, Lynn, about cybersecurity? Is this something that MSPs can build in-house, or they should be outsourcing? What's the thinking around adding that to your portfolio?
Yeah, great question. I've been fortunate over the last couple of years to work with some pretty formidable, cybersecurity vendors out there, vendor clients. And not just cybersecurity, but any practice, right? You want to monetize Office beyond the license? Find a partner who can do that and perhaps learn how they do it. Bring them in, right, to do it. Same thing with cybersecurity. You don't wake up tomorrow and you're in cybersecurity. You basically go search for a vendor partner, a strategic vendor partner. And as I work with a lot of these vendors, some of them start out direct and then they want to go to the channel. So they already have a service delivery arm. So you might actually be able to find a cybersecurity partner, because we're talking about cybersecurity, who can actually, you're just reselling, just like a SaaS license, you might be reselling that cybersecurity stack held by that vendor and work with them on deploying the solution. Maybe soon you won't need them to deploy it and you could build your own services instead of reselling theirs. Maybe you'll learn how to take that first call at your service desk and solve the first couple of problems so that you can, again, move that vendor further into the background. So I think anytime you're adding a new practice, you got to make that choice. Am I building it myself long-term, going through the trials and tribulations of figuring out how to be really good at this? Or do I find a strategic vendor partner who may already be able to help me deliver it with their own service delivery capability or a partner network? And then I can learn from that and add it if I want. Because just like we say, a client or a prospect who runs, I had clients when I was doing this who made stools or made, pins. They just want to make pins or stools. They don't want to worry about tech. Well, sometimes an MSP, maybe they just want to worry about tech infrastructure, and they'll outsource cybersecurity, which leads me to another kind of construction thing. Like, I would work with construction clients, and you see those big buildings in Manhattan, 100-story, 70-story. My client didn't build that building themselves. They were the construction manager. They found the HVAC guy. They found the electrician, the demo person, concrete, and they managed those vendors to success. They worked with the owner and the architect, built what that building's supposed to be, and then they get everybody to do their part. And I think if MSPs had that mentality, they could probably grow what they're good at pretty quickly, grow recurring revenue pretty quickly, grab more wallet share, because they are a technology manager now, not just an MSP. They're going to manage other vendors in their client and deliver what that client needs.
I love the analogy, man. It's it's like you're a foreman, like you're a general contractor, and you can't build a house, like most human beings can't build a building, right? But you get the concrete guy, you get the window guy, the framework guy, the electrician guys or girls or whatever, and they all kind of come together and do their part. And your job is to orchestrate it, right? You come first, you pour the concrete, you go second, that type of thing, and you bring it together. As a matter of fact, for me, that's maybe even the most value add, because you could replace any of these individual components with another one. But the person that's doing the orchestration of all these things is really where the value is. And I would imagine maybe they're the ones who gets the big bucks.
Yeah, it's also a way to kind of
get their name stamped on the building.
Yeah,
there you go.
It's also a way to kind of stop that shadow IT, right? If you're not meeting regularly with your clients and understanding their pain and talking to leaders, if it's a larger organization of the different areas of the business, they're going to go solve their own pain. They don't think they can go to you because there's no regular weekly or monthly or quarterly meetings to discuss. You guys did so great over here. You MSP, you did so great here. Now I got a problem here with marketing automations. So help me there. And then that MSP could help them find the right solution and then support it, take the first call so that the user doesn't go, for marketing, I call that marketing software company. And for accounting, I call the accounting software company. And for anything with my laptop, I call the MSP. No, you call the MSP. They help with that first level problem, and they engage with those vendors they're managing. So,
that's such a good point. The new ecosystem that we talk a lot about is encompassing many, many people, right? Marketing agencies, accountants, digital transformation experts, telcos, and so on. And if you become that MSP, like you said, that people only call you when their laptop's down, their computer thing is busted, I think you're going to be losing, right? Because now, you've got all these other companies, right? That's got a share of that wallet. And maybe they'll start saying, I could do that too. I know someone who could do cybersecurity. Oh, you need VoIP? I know someone who could do that. So what they're doing, they're orchestrating. And I that's a very, very good point. MSPs need to become better orchestrators. Yep. They need to be the hub. They need to be the go-to.
The connector.
This is for me. My first construction client was like 1986. So I've been thinking like this for a long time. I've been sharing it, and now it's the ecosystem, right? So, there's always been one. I didn't do cabling. I had a cable friend. He did cabling. But when
you're the original ecosystem, Len.
Well, when he was doing cabling, I was like, holy cow, that's not that hard. And I hired 4 cable guys and started doing my own cabling, right? So you could learn as you orchestrate, right? And that's how you expand your portfolio. Not just to generate one-time project revenue, but recurring revenue as you bolt on services onto those things you get good at.
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that if MSPs learned one thing from this 60-minute session, is that you better become a very good orchestrator. you got to be the conductor of your orchestra. And the better you can bring those things together, the better it is. You don't have to build everything in-house. Learn from someone who can play, do that well. And then if you feel that there's enough money there and you have the skill set, then, knock yourself out, add it in. Randall, what are you thinking now? We've got about 10 minutes left. What are some of the thoughts you're thinking we want to leave everybody with?
I think the problem is that not every business owner is attuned to the music around them. I think there's a few that are tone deaf, unfortunately. And but that's where you can always learn how to do these things, or find somebody that will help you out that is really attuned. If I again go back to the foundation of really take some time to really work on the business. It's so important. I see so many. We talk to companies across Canada and across the US and then even in the UK. And the good ones are the ones that are really paying attention to doing what we talked about, what Len was suggesting. All these things, they're doing it already, but there's so many that are not, and they just feel like they don't have the time. And I really believe that if you're not taking the time, you're going to have that weird horn section that's just out of sync with the rest of the company, and it just ruins the whole experience for a customer. Really, a symphony is all about all these pieces working together in harmony. And when you have one piece that's out of whack, out of tune, it ruins it for everybody. So you got to be really careful, because as we built that stack higher and higher, there's more people in our band. There's more people in the orchestra, and it gets hard. So I think if I could say it this way, attune your ear to find out what is out of tune in your company and fix that first, because that will probably make it a better experience for your employees and for your customers.
Plus, you maybe become a better musician.
Yeah.
Neil, what are you thinking?
Well, a couple of things that came to my mind. First, it's a case of make sure you're maximising the use of your staff. So the big one I'd look at straight away from the sales perspective is make sure you're using your salespeople in the right way. Salespeople have always traditionally divided into hunters and farmers. So make sure if you've got high churn, you've probably got too many hunters because they're just trying to close business and they don't care about the long-term relationships. And long-term relationships are key to this managed service provider's journey. So make sure that you've got the right people having the right conversations. The second thing I'd go back to is looking at that broader market. And I'm going to use a construction analogy. If you look at construction and one trade, look at surveyors. There are so many different types of surveyors within the construction vertical. Who's the most important? It's the quantity surveyor. Why is it the quantity surveyor? Because he's the guy who makes the company or the client more revenue or saves the customer revenue. So think about actually within your sector, look at the competition, look at the wrapper you put around things, because that is I always got the UVP, unique value proposition, is how you going to look different for the market. It's a wrapper we throw around it, and as we communicate the wrapper, it's going to be the people out there having those conversations. So find yourself some good farmers, make sure they're profiling the customers, having lots of great conversations, and behind that, my last thing would be, and if you need to do that, look again at your commission programs. Look at how you're commissioning those sales guys, and make sure you're not incentivizing dysfunctional behavior. Because again, very often with sales guys, companies inadvertently create that turn them almost into like an adversary within the business.
Neil, just adding a little bit to that, your team today, everybody hears of the challenge of hiring people, retaining people. Looking at the salespeople, which is probably the folks that's going out there and getting the business in and help you to nurture those things, what do you think MSPs should be doing to make sure they hire but also retain the right salespeople?
Well, I think it's not unusual within that sales space to experience what they call the salesperson burnout. So you get a really good salesperson who turns out 2.5 years later to not be a very good salesperson anymore, because that to me is they've been aggressively trying to just generate revenue. So I would say things like, look at the way you commission people and don't make everything based on one measure. So for instance, have an individual target, maybe a group target. Also offer quarterly or even annual recurrent revenue depending on what they're selling, because it ties their longer intention. Prime example, I mean, it's out of date now, but years and years ago when I used to sell Microsoft Open Value or Select licensing, if I sold a big ticket item in that space, then I knew that for the next 3 years on the anniversary dates, I've got a big chunk of change. That's a big incentive for me to hang around to that following year to keep the revenue coming around. So be creative with that kind of commission structure. One company had a really great idea I came across for a smaller company, was you could convert your commission. So say you made $1,000, you could convert that into $2,000, but it was basically company shares, paper shares. And if you left that in there for a period of time, you can then cash those paper shares out for more money. So you're never actually a true shareholder as such, but just a very creative way of saying, actually, I want the good people to see the value in my business and stay long term. So look at that commission structure and make sure that it works for the salespeople as well as the business.
Be creative. Len, we're going to wrap things up with you. We've got 5 minutes left, but what's your best advice to those MSPs out there looking to accelerate their managed services?
At 50% in the middle.
Yeah. No, well, the ones in the middle and the ones on the bottom. Well, certainly, as I always like to say, you really just have to have a really good service portfolio management process, right? Take a look at what you're doing right now. Make sure you formalize your services. Look at it like a service is your product, right? The service is what adds value to that piece of hardware, to that SaaS app. So build out your service portfolio management process. Start with looking at what you do now. Find some gaps. Go find those partners we talked about to do what you don't want to do or can't do or want to learn how to do. And use that service catalog management process to kind of bring it into business. And then as you're bringing these services in or these solutions into your portfolio, to dig into the cost of service delivery, understand what your cost is, and then you could price however you want, right? I deliver a pricing session, and in my examples, I use a 30% markup. People will raise their hand, what about value pricing? What about risk pricing? What about this? And I'm like, look, I'm just using this as an example, right? Because I had a wise man once tell me, double it, then charge it. And he didn't mean just double my cost. He meant double whatever your engineer estimate was, and double your price, and then charge it. Why? Because a lot of times you're throwing a dart on the wall in terms of your pricing, right? So understand your costs, then you could price via markup, via risk, via value, and understand the profit you're going to make. And, as you're even one last bit, as you're adding these products into your mix, don't just become a SaaS reseller and you're making 25 points on this SaaS offering. What's the impact on your service delivery, on your service desk, on your team when they include it in their project? Just make sure you understand the impact of these new, services that are going to scale your managed service delivery and build the cost in and make some money every time. Don't be afraid of tool bloat if you can charge for that tool bloat, right? It's going to help you deliver better business.
Some great advice. Look, I'm just going to wrap this up by saying that, there's a lot of resources out there by amazing companies who can actually give you the data points, can actually help you with process, pricing. There is just no reason why you cannot get the help you need. Just by actually connecting with Len, right? And having him come and review what's going on in your business is a way to get a leg up. I mean, it's the help is available to you if you really want it. The question is, do you want it? And do you want to make that change? And another thing too, as well, is lean on your peers, peer groups. We talk a lot about peer groups in the channel partner alliance. Peer groups are really important. And if you don't have one, join one, make one, get one, right? Because when you pull together, 8 or 10 people together, like-minded in the same type of a boat, so to speak, each of them can actually help each other. And I want to touch as well on the fact that some of the people that you may have in your peer group might be great at VoIP, might be great in security, might be whatever. And then you kind of pull a really cool consortium around, managed practices. So there's many ways to get to the finish line. And I hope that you take some of the advice. Last words very quickly in 10 seconds. I'll just start with Neil and go around and leave with Len as a last. Neil, last word.
I'm just going to build off what you were saying there, Julian, recommending that we don't need to look at competition anymore. It's all about collaboration. There's more than enough value in the channel for everyone to get a slice of the pie. So definitely peer groups, sharing best practice, good way to go.
Randall?
If you want results, you got to put in the effort. I think a lot of people are not putting in enough effort, and they're having that 50% place there where they're not moving. Put in the effort, you're going to move up.
Len, you got the last word, my friend.
Oh, great. Well, I think, this whole session was about, expanding your managed service practice, your recurring revenue. And I think what you got to do is really look at the strategic vendors out there. You mentioned Julian, there's a lot of great solutions out there. Find a great solution and just make sure you're wrapping your services around that SaaS offering, that infrastructure as a service offering, because that's your IP. That's what puts value in your business. What's your IP that you do something better or different than someone else around that very same product that they sell, right? So, be mindful of your own service delivery offerings.
Good stuff. Well, everybody, thank you for joining the session. We're done, and 21 sessions. The next one will be 22. So we'll talk to you then. Take care, everybody. Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.